Kale adjusted the gravity boots again, muttering under his breath about how whoever designed Celera 9 Outpost must have thought the laws of physics were optional. The generator beside him hummed like a disgruntled neon beast, flickering with unstable energy and throwing off sparks that danced across the metallic walls. "If this thing blows, I swear I'm sending a strongly worded complaint to the Galactic Engineering Board," he said, wrench in hand, leaning over the glowing core. "Or maybe a passive-aggressive postcard." He tapped the console and the screen flashed red. "Fantastic. Red means fun, right?" His voice echoed in the empty hallways, carrying a sense of lonely sarcasm that the outpost had begun to expect from him. The hum of machinery and the occasional groan of the metal floor panels were his only companions, until the door hissed open in a way that didn't match any standard protocol. She was there, standing in the doorway like a glitch in reality. A silhouette that could have been human if not for the elegant sweep of her long ears, tipped with a faint silver gleam. Kale straightened immediately, nearly dropping his spanner, and managed a cough that sounded more like a dying synth than anything dignified. "Identification, please. Or, a hello," he said, trying to maintain the semblance of authority despite his sudden awareness that someone or something was watching him with unguarded curiosity. "I'm Lyria," she said, voice like warm light filtering through some distant nebula. "Can I feel your warmth tonight?" Her question hung in the air, improbable and audacious, and Kale blinked, trying to locate the instruction manual for first contact scenarios in his memory. When he realized no such manual existed, he raised a brow. "A warmth, like thermal output or metaphorical human cuddle time." He added the last part reluctantly, feeling the absurdity of it even as his pulse picked up. Lyria tilted her head, ears twitching as she regarded him, and Kale had to resist the urge to comment on how distractingly elegant that motion was. "I mean, yes," she said, and her eyes glimmered with something that was not quite mischief, not quite longing, and entirely unnerving. Kale rubbed his face, muttering, "I knew skipping yoga for 3 years was going to come back to bite me. And here I am, negotiating interspecies intimacy instead of paperwork." He tried to refocus on the generator, and it immediately began to spark and shudder. "Great timing," Kale said aloud. "This thing has the coordination of a drunken cyborg. Lyria, unless you have a secret anti-gravity blessing, I'd prefer if you stayed back." She didn't, of course, stepping closer with a grace that made his boots feel suddenly heavy, as if the gravity of the moment had doubled. "I can help," she said, her long ears flicking with a rhythm he couldn't read. Kale glanced at her skeptically, raising his spanner like a ward against the unexpected. "Last time someone claimed they could help, I ended up with an electrocuted toaster, a singed data pad, and a new nickname I won't repeat in polite company." She laughed, a sound that seemed to ripple through the hall, displacing tension with an ease Kale had forgotten could exist on Celera 9. "I promise, no toasters will die today," she said. Her fingers moved over the generator, brushing along conduits that sparked occasionally. To Kale's surprise, the sparks didn't leap toward her, and the generator quieted, pulsing steadily instead of erratically. You did something," Kale said, trying not to sound like he was impressed. That's clever." He shook his head and muttered, "Or I'm finally losing it." Lyria's ears twitched again, and Kale swore she might be smirking. "You seem different up close," she said. "Less intimidating than the stories said, more human." Kale coughed. "That's comforting, I think. Usually the first thing visitors say is something like, 'Your carbon signature is suboptimal,' or 'You smell faintly of stress and old oil.' Human, huh? I'll take that as a compliment." He attempted a smile, which looked more like a grimace, but Lyria didn't recoil, which in Kale's experience was almost a miracle. Minutes passed, and they fell into a rhythm that balanced absurdity with necessity. Kale explained the quirks of Celera 9 machinery, throwing in sarcastic anecdotes about maintenance crews who had vanished for entirely non-alien reasons, while Lyria made small jokes about his stubbornness, calling him a grumpy human relic with a heroic streak. Kale snorted, nearly tripping over a dangling cable. "Relic? I'll have you know my heroism comes fully certified, with extra sarcasm included." Eventually, the generator stabilized entirely, humming like a satisfied beast instead of a chaotic one, and Kale leaned against a railing, exhaling. "Well, that was surprisingly tolerable. Mostly, you're good at this. Not that I was doubting you or anything, he added, because admitting doubt to a long-eared alien was apparently frowned upon. Lyria's ears twitched with amusement. You humans are funny, she said. Your humor is strange, but effective. Kale wiped grease from his hands, gesturing at the panels. Strange is my brand. I cornered the market on strange decades ago. Not that it's profitable or anything, but it has a nice smell to it. Lyria tilted her head, ears flicking, and Kale swore her eyes glimmered like some distant star cluster, curious and amused at once. Do you always talk like this? She asked. Only to aliens who ask me to feel their warmth, Kale replied, and both of them laughed, the sound bouncing off the metallic walls and somehow softening the cold outpost. She leaned a little closer, and Kale's brain sent urgent memos to his nerves, which he ignored, focusing instead on the generator, trying to convince himself he was a professional, not a man in the middle of a cosmic, absurd, and potentially awkward first contact moment. When the lights flickered again, this time due to nothing more than a minor power fluctuation, Kale muttered, "Perfect." Nothing says romantic interstellar evening like random sparks and the looming threat of electrocution. Lyria laughed, brushing her hand lightly against the console, as if testing gravity and social boundaries at the same time. Kale found himself noticing the way her ears caught the light, glinting silver, twitching with amusement, and wondered briefly if all alien flirtation involved so much unintentional teasing. By the time the hallways fell silent again, the generator steady and the emergency lights dimmed to a warm hum, Kale and Lyria were sitting side by side on a metal bench that was never meant to be comfortable. They exchanged glances, smiles, and a quiet understanding that defied the sterile, frozen environment around them. Kale made a weak joke about how aliens had a weird idea of personal space, and Lyria replied with a teasing grin, ears flicking. He snorted, muttered something about intergalactic romance being hazardous, and realized he didn't entirely mind. For the first time in months, maybe years, the isolation of Celera 9 didn't feel quite so cold. The alarms screamed through the outpost with the subtlety of a hyperactive banshee, vibrating through Kale's boots and making his teeth rattle. He groaned, holding a hand over his ears and muttering, of course, just when the generator is finally behaving, the universe decides it needs a dramatic entrance. Lyria was already upright, moving with that impossible grace of hers, ears flicking as if picking up the faintest electrical hums beneath the alarm's roar. What is it this time? She asked, voice steady despite the chaos, the question punctuated by a twitch of amusement in her long ears. Mining drones, Kale said, dragging a comm panel over to the viewport. Rogue ones. Whoever programmed these things thought patience was a suggestion. They've developed taste for Celera 9 cryonite crystals, and apparently they like to break and enter. He gestured at the approaching swarms, small dots of light moving erratically across the fractured moonscape. And by taste, I mean violent theft, destruction of property, and a side of panic. You know, standard hostile alien behavior. Lyria tilted her head, studying the drones, and Kale noticed the faint glimmer in her eyes that always betrayed amusement at his sarcasm. We need to set traps, she said. I can sense their electromagnetic fields. I might be able to redirect them. Kale gave a slow, theatrical clap, leaning against the console. Fantastic. My partner in panic is a long-eared alien who thinks she's a Jedi with a minor in field engineering. I couldn't have picked better. Or worse. Actually, probably worse. The first drones slammed into the outer walls, scraping metal and setting off showers of sparks. Kale fired a plasma blaster, swearing at the recoil. These things have no concept of personal space. He yelled, rolling behind a console. Lyria laughed, stepping past him with a flick of her hand that made a subtle energy pulse shimmer in the air. Several drones veered, sparks cascading off their hulls as if someone had rerouted their sense of direction. See, she said, smirking. Your sarcasm is oddly ineffective as a weapon, but my ears do the trick. Kale muttered something about hiring her for PR instead of combat, which earned him another laugh, sharp and clear, that made his pulse skip in ways he refused to acknowledge. The drones adapted quickly, splitting into 3 distinct attack groups, and Kale ran a series of improvised magnetic traps, muttering darkly about how Celera 9 previous engineers were, probably laughing somewhere in zero gravity at my suffering. Lyria floated beside him, adjusting electromagnetic channels and occasionally flicking her ears at random, as if enjoying the chaos. "You humans are very loud," she said, grinning. "It's charming." Kale coughed, gesturing at her. "Charming is the polite way of saying mildly terrifying. I take it." One drone zoomed straight at them, claws extended. Kale dove, twisting midair, and somehow his spanner collided with the drone's control panel, sending it spiraling into a wall. Lyria's hands glowed faintly, fingers tracing the air as if drawing invisible runes, and the drone's sparks died mid-flight, as though apologizing for its aggression. Kale scrambled upright, wiping sweat and grime from his forehead. Note to self, never underestimate a humanoid with ears that double as field sensors. Lyria quirked an eyebrow. "Double as what now?" Kale sighed. "You know ears, combat tools, fashion accessories, multi-use implements. You're full of surprises." She twitched her ears, and he swore that motion was a silent laugh. Another wave approached, faster, more organized. Kale ducked under a laser sweep and yelled, "Why do these things keep getting smarter?" Lyria rolled her shoulders, her long hair catching the dim lights. "They're learning from you. They enjoy your sarcasm." Kale paused mid-dive, flat on the floor. "Wait, are you saying the drones are sentient, or just really into insults?" Lyria's grin widened. "Both, possibly, but mostly the insults." Kale groaned. "Great, my words are now dangerous weapons. I always dreamed of this." They worked in tandem. Kale improvising traps and Lyria redirecting drones with her subtle electromagnetic pulses. At one point, Kale shouted, "I need a shield, a weapon, and maybe a manual titled, 'How Not to Die with a Long-Eared Alien.'" Lyria leaned close, ears flicking in amusement. "No manual, but I can improvise." She waved a hand, sending a field pulse that caused 3 drones to spin in midair, colliding with each other in a spectacular display of sparks and smoke. Kale watched, mouth agape. I think I just witnessed drone ballet." With explosions, Lyria gave a small bow. "Thank you, I perform for appreciative audiences." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and they were forced into the cryogenic storage bay to regroup. Kale slumped against the cool metal wall, catching his breath. "This was terrifying," he said, voice cracking slightly, then added, "and strangely exhilarating. Mostly terrifying." Lyria floated beside him, long ears brushing against the frost-lined panels. "You humans are amusing," she said softly, even in moments of panic. Kale raised an eyebrow. "Amusing? That's comforting, I think." They shared a brief silence, the emergency lights reflecting faintly in Lyria's eyes. Kale cracked a grin, brushing frost off his jacket. "Next time we fight drones, remind me to pack snacks. Preferably with chocolate. I hear that's a human survival tactic." Lyria laughed, the sound mingling with the low hum of the cryogenic systems. "Chocolate is fascinating. We do not have anything like it on my planet." Kale gestured vaguely at the drones outside. "Trust me, you don't know what you're missing. It's sticky, dangerous if dropped, but worth every calorie." As they prepared to exit the storage bay, a particularly large drone slammed against the outer wall, sparks flying. Kale groaned, "And here comes the grand finale. I hope you like improvisation, Lyria, because we're about to redefine it." She twitched her ears and smiled, stepping forward with her hands glowing faintly. "I live for improvisation." Kale muttered something about long-eared chaos. And together, they dove back into the fray, dodging lasers, redirecting drones, and trading witty insults while the frozen moonscape blazed with sparks and electromagnetic pulses. By the time the last drone fell, spinning harmlessly into the void, Kale and Lyria collapsed against a bulkhead, breathing heavily, dirt and frost coating their uniforms. Kale chuckled, voice rough. "Well, that was the most fun I've had surviving a Monday. And the least lethal somehow." Lyria leaned back, her long ears brushing against his arm. "You humans are strange," she said softly, "but not unkind." Kale smirked. "Strange is my business. Not unkind, that's my hobby." They sat in silence, adrenaline slowly fading, sharing a rare, quiet moment amidst chaos. Kale nudged her gently with his shoulder. "You know, for an alien who just asked to feel my warmth, you handle danger better than most humans." Lyria's ears twitched, a faint glow in her eyes. "Perhaps warmth is a useful weapon after all." Kale snorted. "Or maybe I'm just dangerously hot. Could go either way." She laughed, and the sound carried through the metal corridors, leaving the aftermath of battle somehow lighter, more alive. Kale sat cross-legged on the observation deck, staring out at Celera 9's fractured moonscape, the distant neon streaks of the abandoned mining colonies glinting faintly like forgotten constellations. Lyria was beside him, legs folded elegantly, long ears flicking as she traced invisible patterns in the air. "I never thought I'd sit here with a human, watching space rocks and joking about their structural integrity," she said, voice teasing, yet quiet enough to carry a faint note of sincerity. Kale chuckled, scratching the back of his head. "I never thought I'd have a long-eared alien critique my sarcasm in zero gravity, but here we are. Life is weirdly accommodating." The past few days had been a chaotic blur. The generator meltdown, the rogue mining drones, and the endless improvisation of traps that should have been lethal but somehow weren't. Kale realized he had laughed more than he had in months, possibly years. And it was because Lyria had been there, challenging him, teasing him, and somehow making danger feel like an absurd game of cosmic charades. He glanced at her, noticing the faint glow in her eyes when she laughed, and something inside him shifted, a subtle warmth he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Lyria's hand brushed against his, deliberate testing. "You've changed," she said softly, ears twitching. "There's less armor now, less distance." Kale smirked, shrugging, though his pulse betrayed him. "Or maybe I just finally found someone willing to ignore the sarcasm and stick around anyway." He paused. "Not that I'm admitting I need anyone, but, well, I guess some humans do, even warriors." She leaned closer, the ambient lights catching the silver tips of her ears, making them shimmer like distant satellites. "I didn't think warmth could be a weapon," she said, almost musing to herself, "but you wield it differently." Kale snorted, shaking his head. "Yeah, dangerous, highly illegal in some sectors, and capable of causing unexpected feelings. Handle with care." Their shared laughter broke the tension that had clung to them like static electricity, and Kale realized he wasn't thinking about missions, drones, or survival. For once, he was thinking about her. He had spent his life training to fight, to survive, to avoid connection because attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant risk. But here, with Lyria's teasing, her patience, and her presence, he felt something entirely new. The possibility that risk didn't always lead to pain. It could lead to warmth, to connection, even to laughter in the face of cosmic indifference. Lyria studied him, eyes softening. "You fight with your mind, but your humor, it's the part that's human. It draws people in. It's remarkable." Kale blinked. "Flattery from an alien who asks to feel my warmth, I should be flattered, I guess. Or mildly concerned. Either way, I appreciate it." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made him grin despite himself. "I'm not flattered," she said, wagging a finger playfully. "I'm fascinated. That's more dangerous than flattery." He rolled his eyes, trying to regain his usual sarcastic composure. "Dangerous, huh? That explains why I keep voluntarily standing next to you, despite the potential for emotional meltdown and minor frostbite." Lyria tilted her head, ears twitching, amused. "Frostbite is temporary, connection that's rarer." They spent hours in quiet conversation, joking about the absurdity of galactic bureaucracy, the ridiculousness of rogue drones, and the unpredictable habits of humans and aliens alike. Kale found himself admitting things he would have once laughed off as weaknesses. How isolation had worn him down, how fear had sometimes kept him from truly connecting, and how the near-death experiences had made him confront what mattered. Lyria listened, her hand brushing against his occasionally, her presence comforting and grounding, as though she were proof that even in the vast indifference of space, connection could exist. The night stretched on, and eventually, Kale broke the silence with a wry grin. "So, Lyria, about that warmth you asked for, I think I can share it, but only if you promise not to tell the drones." Lyria laughed, long ears flicking with amusement. "I'll keep it a secret, but only if you admit it's a little enjoyable." Kale pretended to consider, tapping his chin. "Enjoyable, yes, if you consider mild panic, frostbite potential, and interstellar sarcasm enjoyable." Lyria tilted her head, unimpressed. "You humans are dramatic." He smiled, finally letting himself lean closer, the pretense of stoic warrior slipping away. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "but maybe that's what makes us worth knowing." She reached out, hands brushing his, and for the first time, they allowed themselves to be close, not as warrior and alien, not as survivor and companion, but simply as two beings who had discovered warmth in the most improbable place. As the observation deck hummed with quiet energy and the fractured moonscape shimmered under distant starlight, Cale realized